The fall wind off the Mississippi brought a chill to the Garden District, where my house stood. I had inherited the old building with its veranda and openwork wrought iron railings from my husband, Raymond. 15 years had passed since a heart attack took him at the age of 55. To this day, sometimes I wake up in the morning and for a moment I think I hear him rattling cups in the kitchen, making his signature chicory coffee. My name is Abigail Cunningham, but everyone calls me Abby. I'm 60 years old, and I don't feel my age. After 30 years as an auditor for Gulf Energy Oil Company, I'm retired, but I can't sit idle. 3 times a week, I counsel clients on tax issues. My reputation in New Orleans is impeccable, so there's no shortage of work. I opened the window and let in the fresh air. Outside, the vibrant colors of autumn mixed with the usual humidity of our city. The magnolias in the yard had long since bloomed, but the leaves were still hanging on, shiny and dark green. It's Thursday, and I don't have a client meeting until this afternoon, so the morning is free. Going to visit my granddaughter, the one person I still make peace with my son for. The phone rang as I was finishing my second cup of coffee. Austin's name popped up on the screen. I suppressed a sigh. "Good morning, Mom." His voice sounded unusually cheerful. Not a good sign. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine," I answered, preparing myself for what was to follow. "Listen, here's the thing. Harper's school bill came in for next semester. They raised the fees again. $12,000 a semester. It's a daylight robbery. And Peyton and I are a little strapped for cash right now. You know that." "Do I know that?" "Of course you do. For the last 15 years, they've always been tight, but somehow they find the money for a new car. 2 weeks ago, I saw Peyton's flashy SUV in their driveway. I understand, Austin. Of course I'll help with the school fees." "You're the best, Mom." He just got even more excited. "Why don't you transfer today? The deadline's tomorrow." "Okay, I'll do it this afternoon. Thank you. By the way, you're coming to Thanksgiving, right? Peyton wants to know how many of us are coming." "Of course I'll be there. What do you want me to make?" You don't need anything. We'll do it ourselves. Just show up at 4 o'clock. He hung up without saying goodbye. I put the phone away and looked out the window. In all these years, I'd never been able to get through to my son. Austin had changed completely since Raymond's death. He'd gone from a sweet, albeit spoiled boy to someone for whom I was just a source of funding. First, it was small payday loans, then the down payment on their house in Metairie, then private school for Harper. The list grew each year. I opened the bank app on my phone. The amount in the account was impressive. Years of working for an oil company and prudent investments had ensured me a trouble-free old age. But Austin was never interested in how much I had left after another help. He just asked, and I gave. $12,000 for a semester of Harper's tuition was a pittance compared to what I'd already invested in their family. I remembered his latest business venture, an event management company called Crescendo Events, his third in the last 10 years. First, it was a web design studio, then an organic food store. Both failed despite my investment. Crescendo is in its third year, but it's not profitable. Austin is always talking about some kind of breakthrough, but instead of investing in the business, he buys new cars and furniture. After changing into a light dress, October is still warm in New Orleans, I left the house and got into my modest 2015-year-old Toyota Camry. I never needed expensive things. Raymond had taught me to appreciate simplicity and quality. I drove out of the quiet streets of the Garden District and into the suburb of Metairie, where Austin and his family lived. Their house looked immaculate, a 2-story colonial-style building with a perfectly mowed lawn. Peyton's new SUV gleamed in the sun. I parked on the sidewalk, and no sooner had I gotten out than Harper came running out of the house. "Grandma!" She threw herself on my neck. "You made it!" Her joy was genuine, and I hugged my granddaughter tightly. Her brown hair, gathered in a high ponytail, tickled my face. At 11, she was almost as tall as me. "Of course she is. I promised to show you how to make real gumbo." "Yay, I've already prepared everything in the kitchen." We walked into the house. Peyton was sitting in the living room staring at her clipboard. She barely looked up. "Hello, Abby. I wasn't expecting you today." "I called yesterday, said I was coming over," I reminded her gently. Maybe. Austin is in the office today. He has an important meeting with clients." I nodded and walked with Harper into the kitchen. Peyton had never made much of a secret of her attitude toward me. To her, I was just a purse with legs, just like Austin. Only Harper saw me as a person. The kitchen gleamed with new appliances. Food for the gumbo was already laid out in the middle of the table. Shrimp, sausage, herbs, sausage, peppers. Harper loved to cook, and I was excited to be able to pass on family recipes to her. Grandma, look what I found in Mom's things. Harper held out an old photograph to me. It was of Raymond and me holding little Austin. All three of us were smiling. Daddy is so funny here. That was a long time ago. I smiled as I looked at the photo. Your daddy was as old as you are now? Was Grandpa Raymond kind? Very. He loved everyone, especially your daddy. Maybe a little too much. I didn't add that it was Raymond who spoiled Austin, indulging his every whim. He always said, "Let the child have what we didn't have." I tried to object, but gently, not persistently enough. When Raymond died of a heart attack, Austin was 21 years old. He had just graduated from college and was completely unprepared to live on his own. I took over his financial problems, hoping it was temporary. 15 years later, nothing has changed. Let's start with the roux, I said, pushing the sad thoughts away. It's the foundation of any gumbo. We spent 2 hours preparing a traditional New Orleans dish. I demonstrated, Harper repeated. She picked up everything on the fly. When the gumbo was almost done, Peyton came into the kitchen. "What is that smell?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "Gumbo," Harper answered proudly. "My grandmother taught me how to make real gumbo." "I hope you clean up after yourself," Peyton said, disappearing into the living room. Harper lowered her eyes. I stroked her shoulder. "Don't worry, your mom just doesn't understand the beauty of cooking. Let's try what we've got." We sat down at the table and were enjoying our creation when Austin returned. He flew into the kitchen, undoing his tie as he went. "Mom, I didn't know you were here. Harper, what's the mess?" "Grandma and I were making gumbo," her granddaughter answered quietly. Austin glanced at the pot. "That's it? All that fuss for one dish?" "It's not just a dish," I tried to say calmly. "It's a family tradition. Your father loved gumbo." Yes, of course," he said with a wave of his hand. "By the way, did you wire the money for school?" Not yet. I'll do it tonight." "It would be nice to do it now," he insisted. "I want to close this matter." I silently pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. I transferred $12,000 into his account, showing him the screen. "Great!" he glowed. "Listen, while you're here, could you pick up Harper from school tomorrow? Peyton and I have an important meeting and the school bus breaks down every week." "Sure," I agreed, looking at my granddaughter. Her face lit up with joy again. "Great. I'll see you tomorrow then." He disappeared again without even tasting the gumbo. Harper looked at me guiltily. "Grandma, can I come visit you this weekend? We could bake your chocolate chip cookies." "Sure, sweetie. Just ask your parents for permission." I knew Austin wouldn't say no. For him, my house was a free weekend babysitter, a break from parenting. As I left, Harper stood on the porch and waved. I waved back, fighting the lump in my throat. My granddaughter was the only reason I still tolerated Austin's attitude. For her sake, I was willing to keep paying. On the drive home, I reflected on how much my son had changed. In college, he was the soul of the group, always surrounded by friends. Raymond spoiled him, but Austin retained some sincerity and warmth. Everything changed after his father died. It was as if the anchor that kept his character in line had disappeared. Or maybe I just didn't want to see the real him. When I got home, I got ready for a client meeting. An elderly couple preparing for retirement wanted advice on tax optimization. It was a familiar situation. After 30 years at Gulf Energy, I could make a tax minimization plan with my eyes closed. In the evening, I sat on the veranda, sipping mint tea and looking outside. The neighbors were decorating their houses for Halloween, which was just over a week away. Our neighborhood took it seriously. Garlands, pumpkins, skeletons, and ghosts. Raymond and I used to decorate the house too, throwing parties for the neighbors. Now I just put a basket of candy on the porch for the kids. The phone rang again. This time it was Laurel, an old friend of mine. We met in college and we've kept in touch ever since. Her voice was as energetic as ever. Laurel was in her 60s, practicing yoga, traveling, and had recently had an affair with a golf instructor. Would you like to have a drink with me on Saturday? I'd love to, I smiled. Harper's coming over in the afternoon. Great, you both come. I'll bake my famous maple syrup cupcakes. How's she doing, by the way? Growing up. She's starting to look more and more like Raymond. And Austin? Still milking the mama cow? Laurel was never one to mince words. She told me from the beginning that I spoiled my son too much, especially after Raymond died. You know him, I sighed. He asked for money for Harper's school again today. And of course you gave it to him. What am I supposed to do? Refuse. Then Harper would get hurt. Oh, Abby! Laurel sounded annoyed. You know as well as I do that you could have sent the money directly to the school, or set up an education account for your granddaughter. But you keep indulging your son. She was right, and I knew it. But something was keeping me from putting a stop to this unhealthy relationship with Austin. Maybe guilt over not raising him right? Or the fear of losing my last connection to my family. You know, I tried talking to him many times. He always promises that this is the last time, that his business is about to take off. And you believe that? Laurel interrupted. Abby, assistant. You know better than anyone that his company is a black hole for money. He just doesn't know how to run a business. He doesn't want to learn. I know, I said quietly. It's complicated. Of course it is, but someday you're gonna have to say no, or do you plan to support him until the day you die? I didn't say anything. Laurel sighed. I'm sorry, honey. I didn't mean to upset you. It just hurts me to see him taking advantage of you. It's okay. It's okay. You're right, and I know it. I just can't find the strength to change things. We talked some more and said goodbye. I stayed sitting on the veranda, staring out at the falling asleep street. My thoughts swirled around the same thing. Laurel was right. I'd been letting my son manipulate me for years. The question was whether I had the resolve to change things. The next day, I picked Harper up from school. She ran out to me, laden with a backpack and a folder of drawings. Grandma, look! She handed me a piece of paper with a family drawn on it. That's all of us at Thanksgiving. I looked at the drawing. Austin, Peyton, Harper, and I were sitting at the table, smiling. In the center stood a large turkey, a perfect picture that had nothing to do with reality. It's beautiful, sweetie, I hugged my granddaughter. Where should I take you? Home? Can I go to your place? Mommy said she's having a spa day with her friends today and Daddy will be late. Of course, they didn't even tell me. They just took it for granted that I'd be free. Of course, they came over to my place. We spent the evening doing homework and making dinner. Harper talked about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. I listened, wondering how such selfish parents raised such a sensitive child. Austin came to pick her up around 9 in the evening. Didn't apologize for being late. Didn't thank me for spending the day with her. He just picked her up and drove off, saying, "Don't forget Thanksgiving on Thursday," as if I could forget. The week before Thanksgiving, New Orleans was transformed. The storefronts were decorated with fall decorations, and images of turkeys and pumpkins were everywhere. I have always loved this holiday, a time of family traditions and gratitude for all the good things in life. In our family, Thanksgiving was always special. Raymond would get up at the crack of dawn to start cooking the turkey. I would make sweet potatoes with marshmallow and pumpkin pie. 15 years had passed and I was still keeping those traditions alive. In the morning, I made a shopping list. Turkey, cranberries, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, pecans for the pie, and marzipan for the decorations, the standard set for the holiday table. This year, I decided to also make cornbread using Raymond's grandmother's recipe. Harper loved it. The supermarket was full of people. Everyone was getting ready for the holiday and the carts were full of groceries. I moved methodically from department to department, picking out the best ingredients. In the meat department, I looked at the turkeys for a long time, finally choosing a small but well-fed bird. At the cash register, the sum came out impressive, almost $250 just for groceries. But I didn't skimp on the holiday table. After the supermarket, I went to the shopping center. I wanted to buy gifts for my family. The tradition of giving little Thanksgiving surprises started with Raymond and me when Austin was a baby. Now my son and daughter-in-law would probably consider it overkill, but I wanted to please Harper. At the bookstore, I picked out an illustrated encyclopedia of marine animals for my granddaughter. She's recently taken up oceanography. For Austin, an expensive leather-bound day planner. For Peyton, a silk scarf in a neutral beige color. She rarely carried my gifts, but I held out hope that I'd make a good guess. At home, I laid out my purchases and wondered. In years past, we'd always celebrated Thanksgiving at my place. The house in the Garden District was roomier than Austin and Peyton's first apartment. But 3 years ago, when they bought their current house, the tradition changed. Now I visited them, bringing part of the meal. This year, Peyton insisted they cook everything themselves. I doubted she knew how to cook the traditional dishes, but I didn't argue. Laurel called in the evening and suggested we meet for lunch tomorrow. I agreed. I had just the window between client meetings. Laurel was the only person I could talk frankly about Austin with. She had known him since he was a kid and wasn't shy about voicing her opinion. The next day, we met at a small cafe in the French Quarter. Laurel looked amazing. Trim figure, stylish haircut with silver strands, bright scarf. She always looked after herself, unlike me. I preferred comfort to style. Abby, you look tired, she said instead of greeting me. What's wrong? Austin again? Nothing much, I shook my head. Just a lot of work before the holidays. Everyone wants to close out the tax issues before the end of the year. How much money have you spent on Thanksgiving so far? Laurel looked at me skeptically. The usual amount, I shrugged. Groceries, gifts. Gifts? She rolled her eyes. Abby, why are you buying them presents? It's tradition, I defended myself, even though I knew she was right. Raymond always gave little surprises at Thanksgiving. Raymond died 15 years ago, Laurel said softly. Your son's grown up, and frankly, he didn't grow up to be a very good man. I sighed. It hurt to hear it, but Laurel was just voicing what I'd been thinking in my moments of honesty with myself. I know he's using me, I admitted quietly. But he's my only child, and he has Harper, who you can see without funding their irresponsible lifestyle, Laurel finished. I'm sorry, honey, but someone has to tell you the truth. Austin is used to getting whatever he wants. First from Raymond, now from you. He'll never change as long as you keep giving him money. I was silent, fiddling with my coffee cup. Memories came suddenly, of little Austin throwing a tantrum at the toy store because I refused to buy him another car. Raymond sneaking back to the store to buy that toy after all. Teenager Austin demanding an expensive cell phone because everyone else has one. Student Austin who crashed his car and expects us to buy a new one. Remember when he got into Tulane? I asked Laurel. How proud Raymond and I were of him. I do, she nodded. And I remember when he dropped out in his third year and decided he wanted to travel Europe, and you paid for that trip. Raymond insisted, I defended myself. He said the boy needed to broaden his horizons. Of course, Laurel shook her head. And then Austin came back and graduated in 6 months, which was a miracle. And then Raymond died, and you were left alone with a son who was used to getting everything at once. I remembered the first months after my husband's death. Grief clouded my mind. I moved in a fog. And Austin. Austin demanded attention, money, support. His life couldn't stop because of his father's death. He'd just met Peyton. They were planning to move in together. He needed money for rent, for furniture, for a car. Do you know how much I've already invested in his businesses? I looked at Laurel. Almost $200,000 over the last 10 years. First the web studio, then the organic store. Now this event management company. And none of them have turned a profit. Because Austin doesn't know how to work and doesn't want to work, Laurel cut Laurel off. He wants to be the boss without putting in the effort. And why would he change? He has you as his eternal source of funding. I knew she was right, but something inside me was fighting it. Maybe guilt that I hadn't raised him right? Or the fear of being all alone without a family. What do I do, Laurel? I asked, feeling helpless. Stop giving him money, she said simply. Say no just once, see what happens. We talked some more and parted ways. I went home thinking about what my friend had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe it's time to stop being an ATM for my son. In the evening, I pulled out my old photo albums. I flipped through the pages, watching Austin grow up. There he was, a newborn, a tiny little bundle in my arms. Here are his first steps, first day of school, Graduation. Raymond looked adoringly at his son in all the pictures. He was so proud when Austin got into Tulane. What would Raymond say if he saw what our son had become? Would he support my decision to continue to help him financially? Or would he agree with Laurel? I didn't know the answer to that. Raymond loved his son unconditionally, spoiled him, but he also valued hard work and responsibility. He'd worked for the same company for 30 years, rising from junior engineer to CTO. He saved for retirement, planned for the future, took care of his family. What about me? What have I accomplished by indulging my son? I've raised a selfish man who sees me only as a source of money. The next day, I started preparing for the party. I decided to make pumpkin pie and sweet potatoes, even though Peyton said they'd do it all themselves. I couldn't imagine Thanksgiving without these traditional dishes of our family. That evening, as I was finishing up the pie, Austin called. His voice sounded excited. "Mom, hi, what's up? Are you getting ready for the party?" "Yeah, I'm baking a pie," I answered, tensing up. That tone usually preceded a request for money. "Listen, there's a situation." He paused. "A great business opportunity has come up for me. You know River City Events? They're selling some of their equipment. Lights, sound, practically brand new. They need the money fast, so they're giving it away at half price. It's a chance to take Crescendo to the next level." I kept silent, already knowing where he was going. "I need 30,000, Austin blurted out. "I'll pay you back in 3 months with interest." "I've already got orders for the spring. It'll be a breakthrough." How many times had I heard breakthrough in the last few years? Dozens. And every time I've invested money that never came back. "Austin, I'm not sure," I started. "Mom, please." There was a pleading note in his voice. "This is a really great opportunity. The equipment costs twice as much. I could take out a loan, but the banks require a bunch of paperwork, and the sellers need the money by the end of the week." I closed my eyes. Laurel's right. I need to learn to say no. But something inside me still resisted. "I'll think about it, Austin. I can't promise." "Mom," his tone changed, harder. "This is important to me, for our family. You want Harper to have the best, don't you? Make her proud of her father?" He knew which buttons to push. He always knew. "Okay, I've given up. I'll wire the money tomorrow." "You're the best." He was happy again. "You won't regret it, I promise. I'll see you Thursday." He disconnected without even thanking me properly. I stood in the kitchen, feeling a mixture of disappointment and anger. At myself, not at him. Why couldn't I just say no? Later that evening, while browsing social media, a habit I had no way of getting rid of, I happened to come across a post by Brandon Higgs, an old friend of Austin's. A picture of the boat with the caption, "Soon Austin will have a beauty like this. Can't wait to ride around Lake Pontchartrain." I froze. A boat. Not company equipment, a boat. Austin had lied to me again to get money for his whims. A wave of anger rose up inside me, but was quickly replaced by fatigue. Of course he lied. He always lied when it came to money. And I pretended to believe him because it was easier. Easier than admitting my son was a liar and a manipulator. I closed the laptop and went to bed. Before I went to bed, I stared at Raymond's picture on my bedside table for a long time. "What am I going to do, Ray?" I whispered into the darkness. I was so tired. There was no answer, of course, just the ticking of the old clock and the sound of passing cars outside the window. Thanksgiving was surprisingly warm for late November in New Orleans. The thermometer read 72 degrees, and the sun shone brightly through the sparse clouds. I woke up early, at first light. It was an old habit. Raymond always got up at dawn on Thanksgiving to prepare the turkey. I spent the morning wrapping Thanksgiving meals and gifts. Despite Peyton's assurances that they would do everything themselves, I couldn't imagine the holiday without my pumpkin pie and marshmallow sweet potatoes. Perhaps it was my form of control, a small act of resistance. At the beginning of the 4th, I loaded everything into the car and headed to Metairie. On the way, I reflected on yesterday's discovery. The boat. Austin had lied to me about buying a boat. Part of me was still hoping for some kind of explanation, but deep inside I knew the truth. My son was using me like he always did. As I pulled up to the house, I noticed several unfamiliar cars. Apparently, Austin and Peyton had invited friends over without telling me. It was their style to change plans at the last minute, putting me on the spot. With heavy bags in hand, I walked up to the porch and rang the bell. The door was opened by Harper, dressed in a burgundy-colored holiday dress. "Grandma!" She hugged me, careful not to hit the packages. "I'm so glad you came." "Me too, sunshine," I smiled. "Will you help me with this?" We walked into the house. There were loud voices and laughter coming from the living room. Harper led me into the kitchen where we unloaded the dishes we had brought. "Mom said you weren't supposed to cook anything," Harper said quietly. "But I'm glad you brought your pie. Mom's was weird." I suppressed a smile. Cooking had never been Peyton's strong suit. "Who else is here?" I asked, setting out the groceries. "Dad and Mom's friends, Uncle Brandon and his wife, Aunt Kira and her husband, and some other people I don't know." Harper shrugged. "They talk about grown-up things. It's boring." I nodded. Austin hadn't warned me that the party would be crowded. I'd been hoping for a quiet family dinner, but it looked like plans had changed. After washing my hands, I made my way to the living room. The spacious room was filled with people with glasses in their hands. New furniture I hadn't seen before added a luxurious feel to the interior. A leather couch, designer chairs, a large TV on the wall. I wondered how much it all cost and how long Austin had been planning the purchase. "Mom!" Austin saw me and came over, giving me a one-armed hug. He smelled of expensive cologne and whiskey. "Meet our friends." He introduced me to 5 or 6 people whose names I'd forgotten. They were all friendly, but there was a slight look of bewilderment in their eyes, as if they hadn't expected to see an older woman here. Peyton nodded to me from across the room, not bothering to approach. She was wearing an elegant black dress and looked as flawless as ever. "What are you drinking, Mom?" Austin asked. "We've got great wine, champagne, whiskey." "Just water, thanks," I replied. "I'm driving." "Come on, you'll stay the night." He waved his hand. "We have a guest room." "No, I'm going home," I said firmly. "I have a meeting with a client tomorrow." Austin shrugged and walked away without even bringing me water. I was left standing in the corner of the living room, feeling out of place in my simple dress among the fashionably dressed guests. "Mrs. Cunningham." I was approached by Brandon Higgs, Austin's friend from high school. "That's the post I saw yesterday." "Good to see you. How are you?" "Good, thanks," I smiled. "How are you? Still working at the bank?" "Yeah, still there," he nodded. "Austin told me about your help with the new equipment. Very generous of you." I tensed up. So Austin had told his friends about the new equipment, not the boat. I wonder who else knew the truth. "Yes, I'm trying to be supportive of my son," I answered evasively. "He told me that the boat deal—" Austin came up at that moment, interrupting us. "Brandon, Jack wanted to talk to you about something." He gave his friend a strange look. "Oh, sure." Brandon nodded and stepped back, throwing me an apologetic look. Austin turned to me. "Mom, don't talk to Brandon about business, okay? He gets the details wrong sometimes." "What details, Austin?" I looked him in the eye. "What boat was he talking about?" "It's just a misunderstanding." He waved his hand. "Part of the event equipment includes a boat for photo shoots on the water. It's not technically a boat, but that's what Brandon calls it." Lies. Another lie so obvious it almost made me laugh. I didn't argue, just nodded. What's the point? He's not going to admit it anyway. "Look, Mom, Peyton and I and a couple of other friends are planning to go to Mexico for Christmas." Austin suddenly changed the subject. 2 weeks on the beach in Tulum. It's going to be awesome." "Sounds great," I replied, feeling a familiar ache. No invitation to join me, even as a courtesy. "What about Harper?" "She's staying with Peyton's parents." Austin shrugged. "They adore their granddaughter and she'll have more fun with her cousins." I nodded, hiding my disappointment. I hadn't even been considered as an option, although I would have loved to spend Christmas with my granddaughter. "I'm going to go check on the turkey." Austin patted my shoulder and left. I was left alone watching the guests. They all seemed so carefree, engrossed in conversations about traveling, shopping, and holiday plans. I wondered if they knew they were paying for part of this luxurious life. Or did Austin envision himself as a successful businessman? Peyton loudly announced that dinner was ready and everyone moved into the dining room. The long table was beautifully set, expensive china, crystal, silverware. In the center stood a huge golden turkey. The guests took their seats, talking animatedly. I found myself at the far end of the table next to Harper and an older couple I hadn't been introduced to. Austin and Peyton sat at the head of the table, surrounded by close friends. Friends, Austin raised his glass. I want to thank you all for sharing this holiday with us. Thanksgiving is a time to appreciate what we have and those around us. Everyone raised their glasses. I did too, even though mine was just water. Here's to a successful year and new accomplishments, Austin proclaimed. And here's to new acquisitions that will make our lives even better. Some of the guests shouted, "To the boat!" and everyone laughed. I felt the color flood my face. So everyone knew. Everyone but me. Dinner was noisy and fun. Dishes were passed from hand to hand. Glasses were filled again and again. My pumpkin pie and sweet potatoes were favorably received, though Peyton muttered something about old-fashioned recipes. "Grandma, your pie is the most delicious," Harper whispered to me, forcing a smile. In the middle of dinner, I plucked up the courage to address my son across the table. "Austin, I wanted to ask about the equipment you bought. How's it going?" There was an awkward pause. Austin froze with his fork in his hand, then smiled strainedly. "It's going great, Mom. The deal's almost closed. Let's not talk business over dinner, okay?" "Sure," I nodded. "Just wondering when you plan to pay me back like you promised." The silence was ringing now. The guests looked around, not knowing where to look. Peyton coughed and tried to change the subject, but Austin interrupted her. "Mom!" His voice turned cold. "We'll discuss this later, in private." "Whatever you say." I turned back to my plate, feeling the tension in the air. The rest of the dinner passed in a tense atmosphere. I barely participated in the conversation, responding only when I was addressed directly. Harper cast concerned glances at me, and Austin defiantly ignored me. After dessert, the guests began to disperse, some going out into the backyard to smoke, some returning to the living room. I helped Harper collect the plates and carry them into the kitchen. "Don't mind Daddy," she said quietly. "He's weird today." "It's okay, sweetie." I stroked her head. Adults fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean they don't love each other. Though in the back of my mind, I wondered if Austin loved me at all. Or was I just a convenient ATM in his life? Back in the dining room, I saw that Austin and Peyton were alone. They were arguing quietly about something, but they stopped talking when I walked in. "I should probably go," I said, sensing that my presence was unwelcome. "Thanks for dinner." "Already?" Austin looked at his watch. It wasn't even 8 o'clock. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." I started to gather my things. "Suit yourself," he shrugged. "Peyton, have you seen my cell phone?" They went back to their business as if I didn't exist. I stood with my bag in my hands, feeling like an extra in the house I'd given money to buy. Austin suddenly turned to me, holding a half-empty plate of leftover turkey, potatoes, and gravy. "Here, take it with you." He placed the plate in front of me. "That's all you deserve. Take it home. You don't want to spend money on groceries." His voice was full of contempt. His eyes narrowed. There was a heavy silence in the room. Peyton covered her mouth with her hand, but I saw the corners of her lips twitch into a grin. I froze, not believing my ears. In 36 years, Austin had never spoken to me like that. Never had he been so openly disrespectful. Harper appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with horror. "Daddy!" she exclaimed. "How can you talk to grandmother like that?" "Harper, go to your room," Austin said sharply. "This is an adult conversation." I was looking at the son I'd given everything I had, the son I'd raised, the son I'd given everything I had, the man who had just humiliated me in front of his wife and daughter. Without a word, I turned around and walked toward the exit. Austin shouted something after me, but I didn't listen. My ears were buzzing and my heart was pounding. I walked out of the house, got in my car, and started the engine. After a few blocks, I pulled over to the curb and let the tears flow. Not out of resentment, out of rage and disappointment, in my son, in myself, in this whole situation I'd allowed to be created and maintained for years. Laurel was right. Austin would never change as long as I kept giving him money. But today he went too far. The humiliation at the holiday table was the last straw. Wiping away my tears, I started the car and drove home. A clear plan of action formed in my head. No emotions, only cold calculation, something I've always been good at as an auditor. At home, I went straight to my office and turned on my computer. I opened my banking apps and logged into my main account. Austin was listed as the trustee authorized to make withdrawals in the event of my incapacity. A precaution I'd taken after Raymond's death for fear of being left alone with problems. It's ironic. A few clicks and Austin's access was blocked. Then I checked other accounts and investments. Austin didn't have direct access to them, but I changed passwords and security settings just in case. The credit cards were as follows. Austin had an additional card to my account that he used for emergencies. I blocked it and then called the bank and asked them to issue a new primary card for me. Finished with my finances, I leaned back in my chair, feeling strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I'd done something for myself instead of my son. Protected myself from his manipulation and disrespect. The phone rang. Austin. I didn't answer it. I wasn't ready to talk to him right now. A minute later, a text came through. Mom, I'm sorry about today. I was wrong. Let's talk tomorrow. No apology for lying about the boat. No admission of guilt. Just an attempt to gloss over the conflict so things could go back to normal. But this time, nothing would go back. I'd made my decision, and I wasn't going to back down. No more being an ATM machine for my ungrateful son. No more buying his love that never existed. The morning after Thanksgiving was overcast. Low clouds covered the sky, threatening rain. I woke up at 6 a.m., though I usually let myself sleep in on the weekends. The events of last night kept me awake, replaying over and over in my head. That's all you deserve. Those words, spoken with such disdain, hurt deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the plate of leftovers. It was the disrespect, the utter disregard for everything I'd done for him. I got out of bed, showered, and brewed a strong cup of coffee. The phone I turned on showed 5 missed calls from Austin and a dozen messages. I didn't bother reading them. All of them probably contained the same thing. Apologies, excuses, attempts to smooth things over. But this time, I wasn't going to give in. At 8 in the morning, I called Henry Morrison, my banker and old friend. We'd known each other for over 20 years, since my days at Gulf Energy. Henry always treated me with respect and understanding. Abby? His voice sounded surprised. Happy Thanksgiving. Is something wrong? You don't usually call this early. Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Henry. I need to see you today. It's important. Sure, he got serious. The bank's open till lunch today. Come by at 10 o'clock. I'll have a window. Thank you, Henry. I'll see you at 10. I ate breakfast, watching the morning news on my tablet. Nothing caught my eye. The usual headlines about politics, the economy, celebrities. My personal drama occupied all thoughts. At 10:30, I got in my car and drove to the city center where the bank's main office was located. Normally, I avoided traveling on the Friday after Thanksgiving. The streets were filled with bargain hunters. But today was too early for the main influx of shoppers. Henry was waiting for me in his office. He hadn't changed much in 20 years, still the same thin man with a neat haircut, but now only with a streak of gray on his temples. He stood up, walked around the desk, and hugged me tightly. Abby, it's good to see you. How was the party? Not very well. I sat down in the chair across from his desk. That's why I'm here. I told Henry about last night's incident, about the boat, about Austin's years of financial support. He listened intently, not interrupting, only occasionally nodding or frowning. I blocked his access to my main account and credit cards yesterday, I finished. But I want to make sure it's done right. And I need advice on how to proceed. Henry leaned back in his chair and looked at me thoughtfully. Abby, I'm telling you as a friend, not as a banker. You did the right thing. It was high time you put boundaries in place. He opened his laptop and spent a few minutes checking my accounts. Okay, you've already blocked access to the main account correctly. The supplemental card is also blocked. As for the joint investment account, wait, what joint account? I'm tense. We don't have joint investment accounts. Henry frowned and turned the screen toward me. This one here opened 3 years ago. You don't remember? It's got your signature on it. I stared at the document on the screen. It was my signature, but I didn't remember opening an account like this. 3 years ago. What was going on then? Oh, right. Austin asked me to sign some papers for his business. He must have slipped me this agreement. I didn't open that account on purpose, Henry. Austin must have slipped the documents along with the other papers. Henry shook his head. This is serious, Abby. But fortunately, there's only about 15,000 in the account. We can close it today if you have all the paperwork. Sure. I pulled a folder of paperwork out of my bag. I'd always been pedantic about finances and kept all the important papers in order. Henry and I spent the next hour going through all my accounts and investments. Fortunately, most of my funds were out of Austin's reach. After Raymond died, I had sold our stock in Gulf Energy and invested in safe bonds and index funds. Those accounts were in my name only. You know, Henry said when we were done, you've always been a smart investor. Your financial situation is more than stable. You could afford a fresh start if you wanted to. That's exactly what I'm thinking. I nodded. I have a plan. We closed the joint investment account and Henry transferred the money to my personal account. Then we updated all my contact information and security settings. Now Austin couldn't access any of my accounts. Thank you, Henry. I shook his hand, standing up. You've been a big help. You're welcome, Abby. I'm glad you finally decided to stand up for yourself. As I walked out of the bank, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time, like I'd been carrying a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. Freedom from Austin's manipulations was intoxicating. The phone vibrated in my bag. Another call from my son. I dropped the call and got in the car. I had one more place to visit. The Sunshine Properties real estate office was in the Garden District not far from my house. I had been working with them for the past 6 months looking at properties in Florida. It wasn't that I was seriously planning a move, it was more of a dream, a way to dream of a life without the constant pressure of my son. But now the dream could become a reality. Samantha Prescott, my realtor, greeted me with a smile. Mrs. Cunningham, what a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting you today. Hello, Samantha. I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all. Have a seat. What can I do for you? I sat in the chair across from her desk. You know that house in Sarasota we looked at last month? The one overlooking the bay. Sure. Samantha opened a folder on her computer. 1 story, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, patio overlooking the water. It's a very nice house. Is it still for sale? Yeah, although the price has come down a bit. The owners want to close the deal by the end of the year. I took a deep breath. Moment of truth. I want to make an offer. Samantha blinked in surprise, but quickly pulled herself together. Great! Full asking price, or do you want to haggle? Full. I want to close the deal as soon as possible. We spent the next hour filling out the necessary paperwork. I made a deposit on my credit card, promising to wire the rest after confirmation from the sellers. If everything goes smoothly, Samantha said when we were done, you should be able to move in a month in time for Christmas. That's great, I smiled. This was exactly what I wanted. As I left the realtor's office, I felt hungry and went to a small cafe nearby. I ordered a turkey sandwich and a salad, enjoying a moment of peace. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Austin, but an unfamiliar number. I answered. Grandma? Harper's quiet voice came through. It was me. Harper? I straightened up. Honey, where are you calling from? From school, from a friend's phone, she explained. I was worried about you. Daddy was so awful last night. It's okay, honey. My voice softened. Adults fight sometimes, but it's nothing to worry about. But he was so mean. I could hear the tears in her voice. And this morning he was even angrier. He was yelling at my mom that he couldn't get money out of some card. So Austin has already discovered that I've blocked his access to my accounts. No wonder he's furious. Harper, listen to me. I tried to speak calmly and confidently. Your dad and I are going through a difficult time. We've both said and done things we regret. But I promise you that everything will be okay. You do? She didn't sound very convinced. Really, there may be some changes in the near future, but I'll always be there for you when you need me. You can call me anytime, even if your parents don't want you to. Promise? Her voice trembled. I promise, sweetheart. Now you better get back to class before they miss you. Okay, Grandma. I love you. I love you too, Harper, more than anything. We said goodbye, and I put the phone away, fighting the lump in my throat. Harper was the one person I could give up for. Go back to my old life as a financial donor for Austin. But I knew that would be wrong. The unhealthy relationship with my son was affecting my granddaughter as well, setting a bad example for her. After finishing lunch, I headed home. It had been a busy but productive day. I had taken important steps toward a life on my terms. At home, the first thing I did was check my email. There was confirmation from Samantha. The sellers of the Florida house had accepted my offer. The deal was supposed to close within 30 days. I leaned back in my chair feeling a mixture of emotions: excitement, fear, anticipation, a new home, a new city, a new life. At 60 years old, I was starting over. The thought was frightening and uplifting at the same time. The phone rang again, Austin, for the 10th time that day. I still wasn't ready to talk to him, but I knew I would have to sooner or later. He wouldn't back down that easily, especially when he realized I was serious. I decided to give myself the weekend to think things over and prepare. On Monday, I would meet with a lawyer to consult about a will and opening an education account for Harper. I wanted to secure my granddaughter's future without allowing Austin and Peyton access to that money. Laurel called in the evening. I told her about Thanksgiving and my plans to move. "Finally!" she exclaimed. "I'm proud of you, Abby. It was a brave move." "I'm still not sure if I'm doing the right thing," I admitted. "Is it too drastic to move to another state?" "After what happened?" "No, it's not drastic, it's necessary," Laurel said firmly. "You need a physical distance between you and Austin, or you'll succumb to his manipulations again." She was right, as always. Distance would help me keep my resolve, not give in to my son's entreaties or threats. "What about Harper?" I asked. "I'll miss her." "Florida isn't on the other side of the world," Laurel reminded me. "You can see her on vacations, on weekends, and there's no denying technology, video calls, texting." "Yeah, of course," I sighed. "I'm just afraid that Austin will forbid her to talk to me." "He could try," Laurel agreed. "But Harper's not a little girl anymore. She's 11 and she's clearly on your side. Don't underestimate her." After talking to Laurel, I felt more confident. My plan made sense. I would secure Harper's future through an educational account that would be out of Austin's reach. I would move to Florida, start a new life. I will keep in touch with my granddaughter as much as possible. That evening, I sat down to write a letter to Austin. Not an email, a real letter on paper. I wanted to explain my actions without succumbing to his emotional pressure to meet me in person. "Dear Austin," I began. "After the events of Thanksgiving, I've made a difficult decision. I will no longer fund your life or your business endeavors. For 15 years, I've tried to buy your love and respect, but yesterday I realized it was impossible." I wrote at length, expressing everything that had accumulated over the years: my love for him as a son, my disappointment at his behavior, my decision to start a new life, my hope that someday he would understand my motives. When I finished the letter, I sealed it in an envelope and set it aside. I would give it to Austin in person when I was ready for a confrontation. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. I tensed. Had Austin decided to pay a visit? I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Harper was standing on the doorstep with a small backpack. I swung the door open. "Harper, what are you doing here? Alone? Do your parents know you're here?" She shook her head, clutching her backpack to her chest. "They don't. They think I'm at a friend's sleepover. I couldn't. I couldn't stay home. Daddy yells all the time, saying horrible things about you." I hugged my granddaughter and led her into the house. My heart ached for her suffering, but at the same time I felt anger at Austin. How could he behave like that in front of a child? "You did the right thing to come," I said, sitting Harper down on the couch. "But we need to call your parents. They'll be worried." "They won't check until tomorrow morning," Harper objected. "Please, Grandma, can I stay with you tonight?" "I don't want to go home." I hesitated. On the one hand, I couldn't encourage her to run away from home. On the other hand, I could see how upset she was. "Okay," I decided. "You can stay the night, but we'll call your parents in the morning and explain everything." Harper nodded with relief. "Thank you, Grandma." I made dinner, simple pasta and sauce, which Harper loved. We ate in the kitchen, and my granddaughter slowly relaxed, talking about school, friends, the latest book she was reading. For a while, we both forgot about the problems with Austin. After dinner, I made Harper's bed in the guest room. When she was settled in bed, I sat down next to her. Grandma, she asked quietly, are you really moving? I looked at her in surprise. Who told you? I heard Dad yelling about it to Mom. He said you were threatening to go to Florida. I sighed. Apparently, Austin had heard about my plans from someone he knew. Maybe Brandon, who might have seen me outside the realtor's office. I'm considering it, I answered honestly. But nothing had been finalized yet. It was a small lie to save the day. I didn't want to upset Harper anymore. If you go away, will I be able to come visit you? I could hear the worry in her voice. Of course, sweetheart, I stroked her head. You'll always be welcome in my house, wherever it is, and we'll call each other every day. Promise? I promise. Harper smiled and closed her eyes. I kissed her forehead and left the room, leaving the door ajar. Back in the living room, I sat down in a chair and thought about it. The situation was getting more and more complicated. It now involved Harper, and I didn't want her to suffer because of the conflict between me and her father. But I also knew that I couldn't go on living my life as before. Yesterday's incident had revealed Austin's true feelings for me, and I deserved better. I deserved respect, gratitude, true love, not ostentatious affection for money. Saturday morning began with a thunderstorm. Heavy drops drummed on the roof, the wind swaying the branches of the magnolias in the yard. I woke up early, listening to the sound of the rain. The weather matched my mood, perfectly anxious, but with a sense of an impending cleansing storm. Harper was still asleep in the guest room. I quietly walked to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Blueberry pancakes, her favorite. I turned on the coffee maker and thought about my upcoming conversation with Austin. I knew he wouldn't be long in coming. Yesterday, I'd sent him a text to let him know I had Harper and that she was safe. I didn't get a reply, but I was sure he'd show up as soon as he read it. Around 9, Harper came out into the kitchen, sleepy and disheveled. Good morning, Grandma, she yawned. Pancakes? Good morning, sunshine, I smiled. Did you sleep well? She nodded, sitting down at the table. I put a plate of pancakes and a glass of orange juice in front of her. Grandma, she began hesitantly, picking at a pancake with her fork. Do I have to go home tonight? I'm afraid so, I replied softly. Your parents will be worried. They think I'm at Emily's, she countered. I can tell them I'm staying with her for another day. Harper, I sat down across from her. I've already told your father that you're at my place. She turned pale. He'll be furious. Maybe, I took her hand. But you didn't do anything wrong. You were upset and you came to your grandmother. It's okay. He'll say I betrayed him, Harper said quietly. He always says that when I want to be with you. Those words hurt me. Austin was using his daughter as a weapon in our relationship, making her feel guilty for loving me. That was low, even for him. Listen to me, Harper. I looked into her eyes. Love isn't a pie to be divided into slices. You can love Mom and Dad and me. It's not a betrayal. And if someone makes you think that, it's wrong. She nodded, but I could see I hadn't fully convinced her. Austin's compulsions were too deeply ingrained in her. We ate breakfast, and I suggested we play a board game to take Harper's mind off her worries. We were in the middle of placing the chips when I heard the screech of brakes in the yard. Through the window, I saw Austin's car parked in the middle of nowhere. Daddy's here, Harper whispered, and I could see her tense up. It's going to be okay, I squeezed her hand. Go to your room and pull yourself together. I'll talk to him. She nodded obediently and left. At the same second, there was a knock on the door. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, and went to open it. Austin stood on the doorstep, soaked from the rain and clearly furious. Where is she? He asked without greeting, pushing his way into the house. Good morning, Austin, I said calmly. Harper's packing. She's fine. What the hell, Mom? He turned to me, eyes burning with anger. First you block my cards, then you talk my daughter into running away to you? I didn't encourage anyone. I closed the door and crossed my arms over my chest. Harper came on her own. She was upset about the way you acted after Thanksgiving. I behaved? He was practically screaming. You're the one who made a scene at dinner and ran away. A scene? I raised an eyebrow. You put a plate of leftovers in front of me and told me that's all I deserved. In front of your daughter, Austin. In front of an 11-year-old child. He was confused for a second, but he quickly found himself. I was angry. You shamed me in front of my friends by asking about money at the table. I asked a simple question about the deal I gave you $30,000 for. I countered. The money you spent on the boat, not on business equipment as you claimed. Austin turned pale. Who told you that? Does it matter? I shook my head. Austin, this isn't about the boat. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me for years, manipulating me, using me like an ATM machine. And when I dared to ask a question, you humiliated me in front of everyone. And that's why you blocked my cards? His voice turned icy. Did you want to teach me a lesson? I've decided to end an unhealthy relationship, I said firmly. The cards aren't yours, Austin. They're mine. And the money in the accounts is mine too. I will no longer finance your life. He laughed, but it was an unpleasant, harsh laugh. What are you going to do? Save up for your funeral? You're 60, Mom. What's the use of holding on to money? I'm going to live, Austin, I said calmly. A full life, without manipulation or guilt. I bought a house in Florida and I'm moving in 2 weeks. His face contorted in shock. What? Are you kidding? No, I shook my head. The deal closes in 30 days. A little house in Sarasota overlooking the bay. Just what your father and I always dreamed of. You can't just leave. He took a step toward me. What about Harper? What about me? Shh. Harper will always be welcome in my home, I said. I've already set up an education account in her name to pay for college. The money will only be available to her when she reaches the age of 18. Without my permission? He growled. You have no right to make such decisions about my daughter. I have the right to manage my money, I parried. And I want to make sure it goes to Harper's education, not another boat. Austin clenched his fists, and for a second I thought he might hit me. But instead he turned away, running his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd adopted from his father. You're making a huge mistake, he said more quietly. If you go away, if you cut us off from the money, you'll never see Harper again. I'll take care of it. It's your right as a father. I tried to speak calmly, though my insides clenched with pain. But think about it, Austin. Do you really want to deprive your daughter of her grandmother just because I don't give you any more money? It's not about money, he exclaimed. This is about betrayal. You're abandoning us, your family. No, Austin, I shook my head. I'm not abandoning you. I'm stopping letting you use me. You've treated me like an ATM machine for years, not a mother. I've tried to buy your love, but I've realized it's gone. I will no longer pay for your disrespect. My words seemed to hurt him. For a moment, something like shame flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by cold fury. You'll regret this, he hissed. I swear you'll regret it. At that moment, Harper appeared in the hallway with her backpack in her hands. She looked startled to hear her father's last words. Daddy, she called out uncertainly. Austin turned around sharply. Harper, pack up, we're leaving. I'm already packed, she replied quietly, giving me a worried look. I walked over to my granddaughter and hugged her. It's going to be okay, sweetie, I whispered. Remember that I love you and you can always count on me. I love you too, Grandma. She hugged me back tightly. Austin grabbed Harper's hand. Come on, we have to go. Austin, I stopped him. You're mad at me, and that's understandable. But don't take it out on Harper. It's not her fault. He looked at me with a long stare that was a mixture of anger, resentment, and something else I couldn't quite make out. Goodbye, Mom, he said finally. Enjoy your new life in Florida. And they left. I stood at the window, watching Austin put Harper in the car and drive away without even looking back. Only Harper waved at me from the car window. I was alone in the empty house, listening to the sound of the rain. Strangely, I felt no despair or regret. Just a quiet sadness and a strange relief. It was as if I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. The next 2 weeks flew by in a hectic pace of packing and preparing for the move. I met with a lawyer, finalized the paperwork for Harper's education account. I signed the papers to sell the house in New Orleans. I decided that a new life required a complete break with the past. Picked out the things I'd take with me, gave the rest to charity or sold them. I hadn't heard from Austin. Harper hadn't called either, though I'd sent her a few messages assuring her that I loved her and would always be there for her. despite the distance. Laurel was helping me with the move, giving me moral support. She promised to come visit me in Florida in a couple months when I was settled in. "You're doing the right thing, Abby," she said. "Finally living for yourself instead of your ungrateful son." The day I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of life with Raymond, of Austin's childhood, of the happy years of our family. It was sad, but not as painful as I'd expected. It was as if I had already let go of the past, ready for a new phase. Just before I left, the doorbell rang. I opened it and was surprised to find Harper on the doorstep. "Sweetie," I hugged her. "How did you get here?" "My mom brought me." Harper nodded at the car by the curb where Peyton was sitting. "She said I had to say goodbye to you." I threw a surprised look at my sister-in-law. She nodded at me from the car, not smiling, but not hostile either. Perhaps there was more humanity in her than I realized. "I'll miss you, Grandma." Harper hugged me, and I could feel her tears on my blouse. "Me too, sweetheart," I stroked her head. "But we'll talk on the video link and you can come visit me on vacations if your parents let you." "Dad forbade me to even mention you," she whispered. "But Mom said it was stupid. They fought about it." I was even more surprised. Was Peyton really taking my side? That was unexpected. "It's going to be okay, Harper." I took her face in my hands. "Give Daddy time to cool off. He's mad right now, but it'll pass." We hugged again, and Harper ran to the car. Peyton gave me another nod, and they drove away. I watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and hope. An hour later, I got in my car and headed off to my new life. The drive to Florida took about 8 hours. I drove leisurely, stopping at interesting places, enjoying the freedom and solitude. Sarasota greeted me with bright sunshine and a warm breeze off the bay. My new home, a one-story house with white walls and blue shutters, stood in a quiet neighborhood near the water. It was small but cozy, with a patio overlooking the bay and a garden of palm trees and flowering shrubs. I unpacked the essentials and stepped out onto the patio with a glass of wine, watching the sun set into the waters of the bay. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace and tranquility. There was no guilt, no worry about money, no fear of another demand from Austin. Just me, the sunset, and a new chapter of my life. 6 months later, the April Florida sun was flooding my garden with light as I planted new flowers. During my 6 months in Sarasota, I had grown to love gardening. I had never had time for this hobby before. Life in Florida turned out to be exactly what I had dreamed of. Quiet, measured, but not boring. I made new friends at a local gardening club and at a charitable organization where I volunteered twice a week. I helped disadvantaged children with math lessons and basic financial literacy. The connection with Harper never broke, despite Austin's threats. Peyton, to my surprise, secretly kept us in touch. Once a week, we would video call, and my granddaughter would talk about her life, her school, her friends. Sometimes Peyton participated in these conversations, becoming friendlier each time. I hadn't heard from Austin. I knew through Harper that his event management business was barely afloat. Without my financial support, he had to tighten his belt, sell the boat, and even take out a loan from the bank. Perhaps it would do him good to learn the value of money and work. I didn't hold a grudge against him, just regret that I couldn't raise him better, teach him responsibility and gratitude. But like Laurel said, you can't blame yourself for a grown man's choices. Today was a special day, the beginning of spring break, and Harper was coming to visit me for a week. Peyton had convinced Austin to allow the trip, saying she was going to a spa hotel with her friends and he had to work. He reluctantly agreed, not knowing that his daughter was coming to see me. I heard the sound of a cab pulling up and hurried to the front door. Standing in the driveway was Harper with a small suitcase, smiling full mouth. "Grandma!" She rushed to me and I hugged her, feeling how much she had grown in those 6 months. "My darling!" I held her tightly against me. "I missed you so much!" We went into the house and I showed her the room I had prepared especially for her, overlooking the bay with shelves for books and a small desk by the window. "It's so beautiful here," Harper marveled, looking out the window. "Look, dolphins!" I walked over to her, putting my arm around her shoulders. There were indeed dolphins frolicking in the bay, jumping out of the water and diving back in. Do you like it? I asked. Very much. She turned to me. You know, Grandma, Daddy told Mommy he wants to make up with you. I overheard them talking. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Really? Yes, Harper nodded. He said he was wrong and that he missed you. But his pride wouldn't let him call first. I smiled. Maybe it wasn't too late to have a relationship with my son. Not the same as before, I wasn't going back to being an ATM machine. But perhaps a healthier one based on mutual respect? Time would tell. In the meantime, I had a week with my beloved granddaughter, a new home, new friends, and most importantly, a new sense of freedom and self-respect. I was finally living for myself, not for others. And it was a wonderful feeling,